5 years ago, I made a video entitled Don't Give Up Anything for Lent. It was the very first Catholicism in Focus video that I ever made, and it is super cringy to watch now.
If alcohol or chocolate are serious causes of sin in your life, taking away from living a life of discipleship, then get rid of them.
Everybody's gotta start somewhere, right? Yeah. Because the production value leaves a little something to be desired, I've let the video slip into obscurity, not recommending it or sharing it throughout the years. I really just don't want people watching it anymore. Which is a shame, because I really love the message. The reason that it was one of my first videos was because it was an idea that I was fairly passionate about at the time, and still kind of am. I think that the way most people approach Lent is a waste of time. Let me explain. For many people, Lent is, very simply, a time in which we give something up. It's a time of sacrificing something that we really love, putting ourselves through a little penance, and so a lot of people go 40 days without chocolate, social media, coffee, things like that. For some, this is a powerful spiritual practice that brings them closer to God and instills virtue in them, and if that is the case for you, excellent. You can stop watching the video right now. This is not for you. For everyone else, please, stop giving things up for Lent. The reality is that for most people, giving up something for Lent is a fairly shallow practice. We give up some small creature comfort, something that will cause us a little difficulty, but ultimately instills no lasting virtue beyond Easter, if it instills virtue at all. Everybody knows the person who gives up coffee and is just miserable to be around, or the person who gives up chocolate and then eats 10 pounds of it on Easter. Tell me how that is a good spiritual practice. While giving something up for Lent may be helpful for some, and I'll get to that at the end, the problem for most is that it's approached in entirely the wrong way, particularly with an emphasis on suffering. Jesus died on the cross for us, enduring tremendous pain, and so in this time of Lent, we must suffer as well. And in one sense, sure, that is not a terrible thing. You are never going to hear me criticizing someone who wants to be in solidarity with Christ, and I definitely think that there is an element to that in Lent. Jesus tells us to take up our crosses daily and follow him, and so there should be an element of that in our regular lives. At the same time, suffering can never be the end that we seek. It can't be the primary goal of our spiritual lives. For one, the whole point of the cross is that Jesus took away our suffering. The cross conquered sin and death so that we can be free from it. To make Lent all about suffering would be to focus on only half of the story, missing the reason for the suffering in the first place. Even worse than this, there is definitely a hint of earning one's salvation in these practices. Looking at our sins and seeing how we've let God down, there can be a tendency to believe that we must make up for the things we've done, that we deserve punishment, that if we show enough strength of will and endure enough suffering, God will forgive us and let us into heaven. It's the way that our minds often work, but it's also a heresy called Pelagianism. Nothing we can do, no matter how good or virtuous, can earn salvation or make God love us more. Jesus' death and resurrection did that for us, not our own works. For this reason, it's important to remind ourselves the purpose of the season in the first place. Lent is not an end in itself. It's not a standalone season. Its entire purpose is to prepare for Easter. When we go back to the very beginning, we see that Lent began not as a general practice for all Christians, but as purification for catechumens preparing to be baptized at Easter. They engaged in feasts, prayers, and almsgiving, giving up things in their lives, yes, but precisely because they wanted to live a new life as a disciple come Easter. Eventually, the general population began to adopt the practice as well out of solidarity with them, to help and encourage them, but the focus remained the same: to prepare for baptism, to renounce permanently those things that keep us from God, to become a better disciple. The purpose was never suffering in itself. It was never a mere 40-day test of will before we got everything back. The idea of giving something trivial up for a short period of time would not have made sense to early Christians. Lent is not about living the cross, it's about preparing for the resurrection. What is it that's preventing you from following Jesus with your whole heart? What vices do you cling to that leave you trapped in sin? What about your discipleship is lacking that could use a little focus? These should be the questions we ask ourselves today. This is what Lent is about. Now, does that almost inevitably mean giving something up in your life? Of course. Does it require sacrifice? no doubt. But you can see how the focus has changed. Instead of randomly picking something to give up for its own sake, for the sake of suffering, what we're doing is reaching for the ultimate goal, the only goal, life in Jesus, in order to determine what we need to do. If you find that you're a gluttonous person that needs to become a better steward of the body God gave you, then by all means, give up chocolate for Lent, greatly reduce the amount of sweets you eat, begin to live a more disciplined, healthy life. Not because you want to suffer, not to endure a small dose of pain before returning to your gluttony, but to make a lasting change in the way that you relate to God. My exhortation for you this Lent is this: don't give up anything for Lent. Give up something for life. Look at the way you live. Look at the things you spend your time doing and compare it to the Beatitudes. Compare it to the life of Jesus. If Jesus were to walk up to you today, inviting you to follow him, what would he require that you let go of? What in your life is getting in the way of true discipleship? That is what you need to do this Lent. Forget about chocolate or social media or coffee. Forget about some small practice that won't make a lasting difference in your life. Focus your eyes on Jesus. Look to the resurrection and do what you gotta do to be ready. For me this year, it means focusing on a single word: authentic. A few years back, the Friars had a gathering with the theme, Being Who We Say We Are. It was an opportunity to look at our public personas, look at who we presented ourselves to be, both in history and today, and to ask ourselves, is that who we really are? In other words, does putting on this habit really mean that we live devoted lives of prayer, fraternity, humility, and love? Or is it just kind of a costume? When I look at my life, there are definitely ways in which the initial fervor of my vocation has slipped a bit, which honestly is the natural order of things. The longer we live something, the more casual it becomes, and so it's not a huge worry. But that doesn't mean that I don't need a kick in the pants every once in a while, a call to greater authenticity. For starters, my prayer life comes and goes. Over the years, I've had lasting moments of deep reliance on God. I've had moments in which I've prayed simply because I had to, and sometimes I just didn't pray. At this point, I'm somewhere in between 2 and 3. Thus, starting this Lent, one of the things I'm going to work on is reminding myself that a friar is first and foremost a man of prayer. It's a matter of not just checking the box of prayer throughout the day, but building my life around it, reminding myself that there is nothing more important that I could ever do than spend time with God. It might mean getting behind on work. So be it. I might have to miss some exercise one day. Fine. Unless prayer is the highest priority of our lives, we are never going to find enough time for it. And unless I approach it as something that I want to do, as something that I desperately need to do, I'm never going to be an authentic Franciscan or Christian. In addition to this, I'll be renewing my commitment to fasting throughout the week. Something I've learned about myself in recent years is that I lack discipline when it comes to food. When I see a plate of brownies or a box of pizza, I don't just have one. I sort of stuff my face until I have a stomach ache. Besides the obvious health concerns, this behavior is indicative of something I really want to work on in my life, and that is discipline. I firmly believe that a lack of discipline in small things ultimately leads to a lack of discipline in big things. I've noticed in my life a strong correlation between the way I freely eat and the way I freely sin. It's the same root problem, the inability to say no to the will of the flesh. Fasting isn't an end in itself. God doesn't want us to go hungry or starve. He wants us to develop discipline, to learn to endure small bodily pains so that we can remain faithful even when it's difficult. Because I like food so much, fasting is such a difficult task for me, but an important one that rights so many other things in my life. Especially as a Franciscan, a member of a penitent order, these sorts of practices are absolutely essential. How can I say that I'm a member of the Order of St. Francis if I never deny myself bodily pleasures? For this reason, starting Ash Wednesday and continuing indefinitely, I will start to fast again on Tuesdays and Fridays, but more importantly, I will take a much more disciplined approach to eating each and every day of the week. Eat what I need, don't indulge every impulse. It's about authenticity, not a diet. Which leads me to the final practice I'll be adopting this Lent, which is tithing. I already have prayer and fasting, might as well complete the trio. As I've said before, poverty is a very complicated, very contentious issue in the history of the Franciscans. Without rehashing it all now, I'll just say that it has always bothered me that we don't live it all that well. That said, I don't have a lot of freedom to do it otherwise. I can't choose to live in a poorer house, drive a poorer car, or use poorer furniture. That's fraternal life. We have things collectively. I also can't spend all that much less, as I'm only allowed $200 a month, and I don't exactly have tons of luxury items I can give away. But no matter how small or symbolic it may seem, I can change my approach. Even with that amount of money, I can still tithe and get by. $20 isn't gonna kill me. I know this because I used to donate money each month and then somehow stopped doing it. It's time to get back to that. It's time to remember that even as a friar, my first fruits belong to God. It's about authenticity. It's a mindset. It's a general way of life that needs correcting. And again, I think that's the most important thing to remember here. It's about where I want to go, not necessarily how I get there. I've laid out 3 actions that I want to live: more prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. And these are great guides. I believe that they will help bring more discipline to my life and to keep me on the straight and narrow. But they are not ends in themselves. Simply checking off these boxes each day isn't going to make this Lent successful, nor is missing a few of them from time to time a failure. The question, the real measuring stick, is not whether I was able to adopt a few new practices, but rather if I'm a more authentic Christian come Easter. That is the point. That is what I hope you leave this video thinking about. Don't just come up with a list of tasks. Don't just give something up. You'll end up just making an idol out of a spiritual practice. Giving something up isn't the goal, it's the guide. This Lent, make sure that everything that you do, whether it be an act of sacrifice, a corporal work of mercy, praying, fasting, or almsgiving, whatever it is, make sure that it brings you closer to Christ. If it doesn't, I really don't know how else to say this. You're just wasting your time.